Well, this is part three. The last time I talked about Cilicia primarily, and I'm going to return to this map, which shows the whole area that I'm concerned with here. The map has several important lines. The red line is the present day boundary between Turkey and Syria. The green line is the French mandate as it existed after World War I in 1920. So you see, originally Cilicia was part of the French mandate, but that was detached because Turkish nationalist forces led by Mustafa Kemal drove the French out, essentially. And so the French basically agreed to hand over that territory to the new Turkish Republic. The blue line down here is the line between the French mandate area and the British mandate. This was originally established in an agreement between the French and the British called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. We've talked about that. Now, there's another line I'd like to call your attention to here, and that would be basically this line, the north-south line, dividing the coastal provinces of this French mandate area from the interior. On the coast, we have Lebanon, Alawite, and Alexandretta, later renamed Hatay, which ultimately became part of Turkey, but we'll get to that later. There's a coastal mountain range all along here, the Lebanon Mountains, the Alawite Mountains, and this area, Alexandretta, is also very mountainous. Antioch, or what's now called Antakya in Turkey, is the location of the recent terrible earthquake. From pictures, you can see it's a very rugged and mountainous region. As you recall, it was not the French who liberated this territory from Turkish control, but the British. The British plan originally was for the coastal region, the most commercially important parts, extending down into Palestine, of course, which was British. These would be governed directly by France in their area or by Britain. And their idea was that the interior part would be turned over to autonomous governments led by local Arabs, essentially the family of King Hussein of Arabia. They proceeded to establish such plans. They installed Prince Faisal in an Arab government in Damascus. And somewhat later, they installed his brother Abdullah in Transjordan, which became later the country Jordan. And they also ultimately installed Faisal again in Iraq. However, the French were not on board with this plan. They had received a mandate to govern Syria, and they were going to govern it. So they had no agreement or arrangement with the Arabs, as the British did, and they drove Faisal out of Damascus and took over the whole territory. So that's a overview of this historical background of the stamps I'm going to be discussing. So here's a timeline. This goes over some of the material I've covered in previous presentations. First of all, the whole area was originally Turkish, and then the first stamps used were the Egyptian Expeditionary Forces stamps, later replaced by Syrian Arab government stamps in the interior. And starting in November 1919, French stamps with the overprint TEO, Territoire Ennemi Occupé. They started out, these stamps were originally available only in Beirut, which at that time was just considered part of Syria. The whole area had not yet been divided up. And gradually, the stamps of France, the overprinted stamps, became available in the interior areas as well, as the French took over in Aleppo and Damascus and other towns. So after they had driven out Faisal and his Arab government, they divided the area under their control into administrative districts. At first, all of them used the same stamps, the French military occupation stamps, but somewhat later, Lebanon, Alawite, and Alexandretta had stamps of their own. Alexandretta, I'm going to leave for another presentation. They didn't have their own stamps until later in the 1930s. So that'll be a separate issue. The first French occupation stamps to mention Lebanon were these. And these are still listed in catalogs under Syria, labeled Syria Grand Liban. It was all one territory at that point, and separate stamps had not yet been issued, but Lebanon is mentioned for the first time. Okay, starting in 1924, we have the first stamps, French regular issue stamps, overprinted for Lebanon. And the name chosen, Grand Liban, I guess would be translated Great Lebanon. I don't have any official explanation why that name was chosen, but I can tell you that the territory that now forms the country, Lebanon, was not a unified entity under the Turkish administration. Lebanon was not a province of Ottoman Turkey. Instead, there were several different provinces. During the Ottoman period, the Turkish rulers tended to divide up their provinces according to the populations in the areas. And the area that's now Lebanon had several different groups, not only Shiite and Sunni Muslims, but also a considerable minority of Christians, and another group called Druze. And of course, there were others as well, Jews and Alawites and others. The Ottomans had several different provinces, which were then united into territory known to the French as Great Lebanon. There was a second issue with Grand Liban abbreviated there, plus an Arabic version of the name. It seems almost as though the French suddenly realized, oops, we should include the local language here, which was spoken probably by the majority of people. Undoubtedly, the majority spoke Arabic. So here we have French and Arabic. In this slide, I'm showing you that the issues for Syria and Lebanon were parallel. The Lebanese stamp of the first issue was very similar to the contemporaneous issue for Syria. And then when they went to a bilingual overprint, you see the Syrian form and the Lebanese form. And similarly, when the first actual printed definitive stamps came out, they were also quite similar in design, Syria and Lebanon. Here are the two overprints, the French and the bilingual, on the 1924 Paris Olympics stamps. Interestingly now, 100 years later, we have another Olympics planned for Paris. I would imagine the selection of Paris might have had something to do with that, the 100th anniversary. This would be the first pictorial issue for Lebanon. It's got views of various cities. We have Beirut and Tripoli, Baalbek, and a few others. In 1926, the first stamp shown at the top is simply a revaluing of one of the pictorial issues. Many surcharges were applied to these stamps as the rates changed and probably as the currency was revalued. And they needed to have different denominations of stamps. But the rest of the stamps on this screen are simply the overprints, Republic of Lebanon, or République Libanaise in French. The name was changed. It was still, of course, under French control, but there was, shall we say, a gesture toward the local autonomy of the region in naming it the Republic of Lebanon. And once again, originally the overprint was in French only, and then a second overprint was applied with French and Arabic. And more bars were added to cancel out the original inscriptions. You can see here that some of the stamps were done in both red and black. Here's the overprint in all red. Here's black plus red, and the same thing on the 5 piastre and the 25. This combination of different colors and printings combined with the surcharges, which were then later added to these stamps as well, create quite a welter of different overprints. It can be very difficult at times to correctly identify these stamps. The Scott catalog lists them all, but it gives very minimal descriptions of the differences between the different overprints. You have to really be careful to sort them out in order to give them a correct Scott catalog number. These are airmail stamps, stamps that were originally overprinted with Republic of Lebanon overprints and then an airplane added separately in what we call the two-step method. In other words, two separate overprints. The same stamps were overprinted using a single step overprint, where the airplane and the inscription Republic of Lebanon are coordinated as a single overprint. And you can see that the relationship between the airplane and the text is the same on all these stamps because it's a single overprint. Here's one of the few varieties I happen to have, inverted airplane. As philatelists, we always like to see the airplanes flying upside down whenever possible. Now, these are stamps that are somewhat rare. They're not listed in the Scott catalog, and in fact, they were never issued, but they're stamps that had originally been overprinted with the avion in French and Arabic for airmail in green, and then received the red airplane overprint as well. It seems that what happened is the printing company that had the contract to print these stamps on their own created these varieties. They were never issued or approved, and most of them were destroyed. A few were sold, but most of them were destroyed. According to the book I have about Syrian postal history, only 10 sheets of each stamp were rescued from destruction. So there are now a total of 500 sets somewhere in the world, which is a pretty small number. Stamps of which only 500 exist generally are valued in the hundreds of dollars. This is the ultimate here with stamps with actually 3 separate overprints. You have the green avion, you have the Republic of Lebanon, and the airplane. Perhaps I shouldn't say separate, because in this case it does appear that the Republique Lebanese and the airplane are a one-piece overprint, but this was done on top of the green avion. Once again, this is something that was not approved, but was carried out by the printing company and is canceled as well. Apparently, these are favor cancels. There's no evidence that these actually went through the mail. They were not officially approved or issued, but they have these Beirut favor cancels. The next topic here is the stamps of Alawite. Starting in 1925, separate stamps were issued, and it's not really clear to me why separate stamps were issued for Alawite. It was a separate district, simply received its own stamps in 1925. Again, we have the overprint in French and Arabic. Here's a view of the Alawite Mountains, part of the coastal range there that extends down the coast of the Levant. The Alawites are actually, the Alawite term Alawite refers to a group of people who live traditionally in these mountains, an offshoot of Shia Islam. I won't go into any detail about what they believe, but they occupied a rather low position in the social structure of Syria before the war. And during the French occupation, an example of their low status was the fact that they were not allowed to give testimony in courts. This was during the Turkish period. because they weren't considered people of the book like Jews and Christians. However, they found a way to overcome this history of discrimination through military service. The French, during the period of the Mandate in the 1920s and 30s, faced a nationalist insurgency led by Sunni Muslims. And in order to combat them, the French recruited local soldiers from the minority groups, especially Alawites. So this continued all during the period of the Mandate. And by the end of World War II, Alawites made up about 60% of the non-commissioned officers in the Syrian army. As we know then, by the 1960s, there was a military coup, and the Alawite-dominated army took over the country and has been in power ever since. Here's another change. In May of 1930, the name was changed from Alawite to Latakia, and that's simply the name of the principal port and capital of the province. So these stamps are issued for the same territory as Alawite, but with a new name. This is simply the pictorial issue issued for Syria, overprinted for Latakia. Latakia was always a part of Syria. It never became a separate country like Lebanon did. And is presently simply a province of Syria. So there's the whole set. All right, that's it.